Okay, I think we should be live now. Fingers crossed. Okay, so hello if you're watching. Thank you very much for joining us today. We just thought we'd have a really kind of laid back, open discussion about life after lockdown when you're living with an energy limiting chronic illness, because obviously these are really bizarre times that we're living in. And I'm really grateful to have Dr. Sue Pemberton of Yorkshire Fatigue Clinic here with me today. So do you want to briefly introduce yourself, Sue?
Yes, hello, I am Sue. I'm an occupational therapist. So I've worked in the area of fatigue specifically for about 30 years. And I specialise obviously in the condition myalgic encephalomyelitis, which is also known as chronic fatigue syndrome or CFSME, sometimes people refer it to. So I am here to try and offer some experience from what we do in our work.
Amazing. And just to give you a bit of background about myself, my name is Pippa Stacey. In a nutshell, I'm a chronically ill writer and blogger. I'm based in York. I'm also a chronically fatigued human being. I was diagnosed with ME in 2014, but I've had the symptoms since I was around the age of 15, so going on 10 years now. And like many people, these bizarre times have kind of raised a fair few questions about what life is going to be like in the near future. We've had, in the UK, we've had this period of lockdown, and the process of adjusting to the new circumstances and now beginning to come out of that is challenging for any person. But when you're dealing with a chronic illness, especially something like ME or chronic fatigue, there are a whole host of challenges. And we thought we'd have a chat about those today. Hopefully, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, if you're watching live with us now, you'll be able to comment, share your own experiences, join in with the discussion. I can already see a few hellos from people, which is really lovely. We have we have 26 people watching at the minute, Sue. So
fantastic.
And so yeah, as we go along, we've already had some questions that we've kind of based a rough structure around, but if you have any questions of your own, please feel free to jump in, share your own experiences. But with that in mind, I think we should probably do a little bit of a disclaimer before we start. So I'll hand that over to you, Sue.
Yes, I think as we were saying, Pippa, it's important that everybody remembers they're different. Everybody's got an individual health problem, individual circumstances. So the sort of advice we can give out tonight is just really general advice. We can't tailor anything to anybody's specific circumstances. You know, people may have questions about their own individual health. And that really needs to be seen in a clinical setting. But tonight, hopefully, we can just give some tips and some pointers, and then maybe people can think about how they could apply that to their own sort of individual health problems.
Absolutely. So I suppose what we're doing here is more of like a chat about lifestyle and condition management rather than people's individual situations. But fingers crossed, this will still be helpful. And like I say, I've got kind of rough structure here, very professionally set up on the iPhone. So let's get into it, shall we? Okay, so I think we should start with the $1 million question. This is the question that's come up time and time again. And it's all about how, for many people with chronic illnesses, life has obviously been a lot slower and more restful over the last few months as we've all been in lockdown. And now that we're beginning to come out of that, people are quite concerned that they're feeling weaker than they did, and they're finding they have a lower energy threshold than they did before they went into lockdown. So the question somebody asked was, how do I begin to build up my energy levels again?
Okay, so that's a really good question. Just to start with, to say that obviously lockdown has had advantages and disadvantages for people as well. As you say, it has been slower, it's been more restful. So a large group of patients that we work with have actually been doing better. It's actually been helpful for them that the pressure's been off, that they can live life kind of more as they would have anyway before lockdown, but without all the pressures from everybody else interfering with it. And also there's a group of patients where maybe they're a bit more anxious, life's a bit more difficult, but for everybody it's been more slowed down and more restful. And I think firstly we need to remember that you need to have a balance between activity and rest. The human body is built to balance between these two. So just the same as overactivity can be bad for your health when you've got chronic conditions and you've got very limited energy. So if you overdo it, you get a reaction. It's really important to remember that sometimes actually rest can cause reactions as well, that if you do less activity, your body doesn't need to produce the same amount of energy. So you do tend to shut down more. it's a bit like hibernating in winter. We all kind of shut down, we have less energy, we lie around more, some people have been sleeping more. So back to the right balance for you is really important, and the only way you can really rebuild your energy is to do it very slowly. Think about where you get energy from. So are we drinking enough fluid? Because often people aren't actually getting enough fluid in. Are we eating the right food at the right time of day? Have we got a bit sloppy in our habits and we're just eating when we feel like it? Well done, Pippa. Yeah, so it's important to make six are there. Also, sleep patterns. If you start with your sleep pattern, try and get that back, because obviously a lot of people are sleeping in late, not getting up at the same time, so that's important. Another thing that we need to think about when we rest more is you may have been lying down more. So a lot of people lie down to rest, and the human body needs to be upright in order to actually tolerate gravity. So the more you lie down, harder it is for the body to get up and then move around. So just simple things like trying to change your position frequently. Try and just get up and do a small walk around, but more frequently. So try not to do big things that then take all your energy in one go. If you can, do a little bit without using all your energy up so that it feels doable, and stop and rest then, and then think about doing it again, so that you get into do a little bit of activity, rest a bit, and then hopefully the energy starts to come back a bit more.
Definitely. I suppose it ties into the whole boom and bust situation. That's something I'm very guilty of, not using it the way I should. It can be so tempting when you're dealing with any kind of fatigue issues to kind of go for a big woof and a big push and do the thing that you want to do, and then you do end up suffering the repercussions of that. So I suppose it is just being mindful of the things you've said, and hopefully this will act as kind of like a prompt, because I know during lockdown that's something I've been guilty of. I've been less kind of proactive in thinking about these things, and I'm sure that's something that a lot of other people will experience as well. So hopefully, if anything, this is kind of like a little reminder to start bringing these in, and as you say, doing it in a way that works for you, slowly. Don't go for it all at once. Don't declare yourself like a health queen the next day and suddenly doing all of the things again, something I'm very guilty of. So yeah, I'm sure that's going to resonate with a lot of people. I'm just looking at the comments. Let's see what Zoe has to say in response to that. So the pressure of not having to drive or go into work has been such a relief. I normally do 3 days at home and then 1 day actually in work, but just not having that 1 day has been so much better. Yeah, so I suppose that could lead us on nicely to talking about work and employment and that kind of return there, because that's something we had a lot of questions about as well. I think the one that somebody asked, which came to mind there, was when it comes to work, and obviously being mindful again that people with chronic illnesses all have different situations. Some people will be working full time, some will be working part time, some won't be able to work at all. But for those who are returning to work in whatever form that looks like, a few people are worried about being thrown in at the deep end, and having employers who don't necessarily understand the need to build up slowly and avoid the overexertion. So I suppose, do you have any thoughts on kind of like that shift back to work, whether that's the physical side of it or having these conversations with employers? Any kind of thoughts in that area?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully this is going to be a time in which employers are going to understand chronic illness much better. Yeah, absolutely. They have enabled working from home for a lot of employers, which is brilliant. And also we should mention the children as well, because a lot of children have chronic illnesses. They've been able to access school in a way they've never been able to access school. So I think in the past, a lot of a barrier that said, we don't enable working from home. It can't be done. And now it's been proved to be done. So for many people, they now have that on their side. Your employer can't say you can't do it from home if you have been doing it from home. Certainly the one thing I would say about employment is be really aware of the Equality Act. Under the Equality Act, if you're disabled, you have the right to reasonable adjustments, and working from home can be a reasonable adjustment. So, be aware of what you're entitled to. Maybe check your policies for your company. Maybe talk to your union as well, because they normally know what you can do. and then think of how it's going to work best for you. So it's always good to give an employer a solution. So say to your employer, this is how I want to build it back up. Yeah. And it's very hard for an employer to say no to that. They can. And under the Equality Act, they need to have a good reason for turning down any reasonable adjustments. So my advice is always think of a sensible plan, know your rights, go in there and do a phased return, just you would as if you were off sick. Ask if you could up slowly. And I think for a lot of people, they'll be able to keep working from home as part, even if you have to go in for part of your week, you may find that you can actually change slightly and do it that way. For those people who've been furloughed and it's a big shock going back to work, so you've got to go into work, again, see if you get a phased return, just the same as if you were coming back off sickness, and see if you can introduce it gradually. And at the end of the day, the employer's going to have a lot of people coming back all at one time. So probably 1 or 2 employees taking longer is not going to be a big deal for them. Plus, they're still getting your furlough pay topped up. So a lot of people can go back part-time now under the rules and still get paid for your hours. So I think this is a real opportunity. And I would just say maximise that and come up with a plan that works for you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think one of the biggest positives you can take is actually going in there with a plan where you've really thought about what's going to help you on a day-to-day basis, and just being able to go to them and say, hey, this is the situation, let's do this, rather than kind of going in and saying, I can't do it. I will put a cheeky plug in here for, I actually work for a small charity called Astrid, and we match talented chronically ill people with inclusive employment opportunities. And something we're really pushing for at the minute relates to the point you raised about the fact employers can't turn around and say, oh no, we can't offer reasonable adjustments, when it's exactly what they've been doing for the last 3 months. So in a way, they have no excuse not to accommodate the needs of chronically ill talent. Yeah, so if anybody is looking for further support or advice, or even inclusive employment opportunities, head over to astrid.org. They're a really lovely team. I'm hugely biased, obviously, but we have big things planned for this period. So I've got that in there now. So yeah, employment.
Brilliant. And any support?
Oh, the audio went a bit there, Sue. Do you mind saying that again?
Then any support is really helpful. You know, any agencies, services like that. You know, people should make use of things. You know,
absolutely.
Unions, any of the charities. Speak to people for some help.
Definitely. Don't be afraid to reach out, because this is the golden time for kind of reevaluating your situation, finding things that work for you. So please don't ever be afraid of reaching out and taking advantage of the support that's out there. And I suppose that's really relevant for perhaps anybody who's slightly younger watching this, who's going back into education, school or university. I mean, purely from personal experience, it's been very enlightening to see how, when I was a student back in 2013 to 2016, having lectures recorded and available to watch from home was apparently completely unreasonable. And then all of a sudden, university overnight has shifted to being remote and online. Suddenly these things are possible, but we're not going to be bitter about that. And in a way, I suppose it might even be that this is the thing that makes university more accessible for chronically ill students in the future. So I suppose, any advice for university students or those returning to education?
Again, I think there'll be more opportunities. A lot of the students we work with have already been told that they'll be able to get lectures online, you know, and you can have things recorded. Also, always speak to your disability student advisors. So every university has got people there who can help support you when you're in the university, particularly if you're new to the university. Find out about your disabled students allowance, what sort of adjustments you can have. So sometimes you can have longer time scales. Like we say, now there's more video recordings you can get access to. And the same for students at schools and colleges. You know, talk to people about what might be available, because I think the world has opened up a little bit more now.
Absolutely. And again, I'm not going to be plugging myself all the way through this, but I do have a book that I wrote that was published earlier this year for any potential students. It's called University and Chronic Illness, a Survival Guide, and you can buy that on my blog, which will be linked in the description somewhere on this screen. And I actually also have a blog post that's basically connecting potential students with disabled students from universities around the UK who volunteered to be a point of contact. So if you're applying to a particular university and you have questions that you'd rather ask to an individual who's been in that situation, you can find that on my blog as well. So hopefully that's helpful. Okay, so I think just keeping an eye on comments. Thank you so much for your lovely comments so far. As I mentioned before, please do feel free to share any of your own experiences or ask any of your own questions. Let's see what else came up. I suppose we could talk about kind of the mental health side of things as well, because that's obviously really relevant to this situation as well. One of the questions was, I'm worried about FOMO, fear of missing out after lockdown ends, something I can relate to a lot. So I suppose any tips or advice for people who are perhaps coping with the world returning back to normal, whereas they still might be dealing with the debilitating effects of a chronic illness, any kind of tips for coping with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really difficult, isn't it? Because it's not just fear of missing out, it's the fact that you didn't get to do these things before lockdown. So some people have lived in lockdown for most of their life, really, and not been able to socialise and have the lives that they've wanted to. And then everybody has kind of joined you and can understand it for a while, and you feel a bit more part of community because everybody else is missing out, and then kind of they go back to their normal lives and you can feel left behind. So I think it's really difficult for people going through that again. What I say is, it doesn't help us. Yeah, you're right. There are things you can't do, but focus on what you can do. So try and be selective about the people you see. You don't need to see everybody. Maybe choose the best friends or the things you really want to do, because we all need something to look forward to. Yeah. I think a lot of people are worried about getting the virus as opposed to going out. And actually, I think the reality is when you go out in the world now, actually lots of people are keeping their distance. A lot of people are quite worried about going into busy situations. So you're not going to be on your own with that. And I think if you can be assertive, you know, so if you're going somewhere, try and make sure it is quiet, that you're just meeting with people you know, that you can keep your social distance. Actually, there are opportunities out there. So there are places that are quieter, there's restaurants that are quieter, pubs that are quieter now. You haven't got all the noise and the kind of commotion. So it's maybe about pick your places, pick your times, have a plan. But I think it's important people do get back out there, and I think it's important you do have some fun. So don't feel that because there's a virus out there you can't do anything. It's equally harmful to have no life.
Yes.
So we want to be able to just be sensible. Yeah. But remember that everybody misses out on something. There's this big thing in society today that we can all have whatever we want and do whatever we want, and actually even healthy people can't do that.
Absolutely. And oh my goodness, social media can be an absolute facilitator of that. Like for many people, myself included, social media can be a lifeline. And when you perhaps aren't able to go out into the world, it offers such a valuable tool for communication. But on the other hand, seeing all of the people who are apparently doing everything and this highlights reel of people, I think that can be really isolating as well. And if you are in that situation, something I highly recommend doing is taking a step back from social media. So this past week, when Super Saturday, as it was called, when all the pubs opened, like I made the decision to come off social media for a week because I knew it was just going to make me sad. So yeah, sometimes it is worth doing. I know it's easier said than done. And let me get rid of that one. I
definitely agree. I was going to say, Pippa, I definitely think that social media advantages, but you need to ration. People do get overwhelmed, and it's not real life. You're seeing these people post things, but they're trying to present a picture of themselves. It's not the real world. So buy into that culture.
Absolutely. It's so important to keep that in mind. It's so easily forgotten, but it's so true, isn't it? I've just pulled a comment up. I hope I'm going to say this right, from Nalina, and she has put, I have chronic fatigue, and it's actually been lovely to be able to be social during lockdown because everything's been online, which is so true. As we come out, have you got any tips for keeping that social life going? And I think we've touched on that a bit already, but I just thought that was a really valid point to bring up, the fact that lockdown has actually made day-to-day life a lot more inclusive for chronically ill people who perhaps might struggle to leave the house. So we've had things like, we've had theatre online, we've had all sorts of things. Like, for the first time, non-disabled people have been putting themselves in that position. Well, they've had to put themselves in that position where they can't leave the house. So yeah, I completely agree. It's been really lovely to have these things more easily accessible. So in terms of keeping social life going, I suppose it's exactly as you said, Sue. It's kind of thinking about what's going to reasonably work for you, thinking about the environment you want to be in, the people you want to talk to, and yeah, just kind of figuring out what's going to work for you as an individual, I suppose. Any other thoughts in that kind of area?
Yeah, I think that people have also got used to communicating a different way as well. So things like, you know, family Zoom calls, doing things different. We've got used to that technology. So if that's the only way you could access people anyway, you might find friends are more willing to set up, say, you know, meet your friend on Zoom once a month still. Just because people can go out doesn't mean they need to stop using ways of communicating. And for you, it might make life better. So just encourage people, set up those links, ask your friends to, let's all still get together on Zoom once a month or whatever works for you. Just because they can go out doesn't mean that you lose that link.
Absolutely. And I suppose we can hope as well that as a result of all of this pandemic stuff, I suppose we can hope that people perhaps have more empathy for what it's like to be confined within four walls for the majority of the time. So hopefully people being more mindful of that and what it's like and how isolating that can feel, hopefully that will encourage them to think about how they can be more inclusive themselves, how to make sure that you're not being excluded. And I really hope that's something we're going to see. I feel quite optimistic that that's something we're going to see more of in the future. I was just thinking, actually, that tied into another question we got asked about going out and kind of socializing again once people feel ready to do that. And it was, how do I make sure that people believe that I'm vulnerable and they don't dismiss my concerns about social distancing? So I suppose this kind of relates to the fact that people have kind of different, not so much opinions, but the guidance has kind of shifted. So like there are less stringent social distancing measures in place than there once were. But I know a lot of people would still be more comfortable maintaining that 2 meter distance and not having that close contact with people, which is obviously completely understandable. I think that's probably where I'm personally at the minute as well. So I suppose any tips for kind of making sure people understand that?
Yeah, I think it's important to be assertive. Yeah, I think often people who've got chronic illnesses tend to feel like they're a burden or they're being different, they're causing other people problems, so they don't like to speak up necessarily for what they need. If you need people to stay further away, then it's absolutely fine to say it. Yeah, tell people what you need, and they may not remember that you're vulnerable, but if you say to people, this is how I need to do this, it's very hard for them to say no. I think it's just being clear that that's what you want, because we sometimes assume that other people get it and other people will understand. And as you say, they'll have short memories, they'll go back to doing things. But if you maintain it from the very beginning, so if you always say, no, this is better for me, then hopefully the people who are your friends and who actually have your interests will do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I suppose we can just hope that people will perhaps have more empathy for those of us who are in that situation now as a result of this, and just kind of having that awareness that everybody experiences things like this differently. I saw there was a bit of talk a while back, and I couldn't work out how I felt about this, about having ribbons that identify you as vulnerable. And I suppose it's one of those things, like if it's something that's going to make you more comfortable, then absolutely go for it. But I know from personal experience from using things like the Please Offer Me a Seat scheme, it's a bit hit and miss sometimes, really, but it'll be interesting to see if that actually does get implemented or whether that was just a hypothetical idea that was put out there. I just saw a really interesting comment come in from Laura, who's on the shielding list, and she says she's struggling with not having the separation between work, home, and social with when everything's online in four walls. So, any tips for getting that balance and that separation back when you're in one place? And that's something that Yorkshire Fatigue Clinic actually really helped me with a few years ago. So, handing this one straight over to you, Sue.
Good. Yeah, I think separation, you've got two ways of separating things. You've got separation in terms of environment. So even if you're within four walls, particularly if you're working from home or you're having to look after children and homeschool them, try and keep an environment for that. So you might use a particular table or particular corner of the room to do that. Try and have separation for actually your relaxing rest, and maybe not necessarily in your bedroom, if you can find somewhere else that's like your rest space. And the same with time. You can have structures and tables to say this work time, this is home time, this is kid time, this is socializing time, because again it helps to put a boundary in there. If you say, look, I'm not accessible between this hour and this hour because I'm doing my studying, or that's why I'm doing my work. So think about trying to use even if it's a small home, in different ways. Simply sitting in a different chair to do a different thing can make a difference.
Yeah, I completely agree. I work from home, and one of the really tiny things that you wouldn't necessarily assume makes a difference, but it does. So I had a really naughty habit of working from bed, which is terrible. But when you're in that situation, it's so easily done when you don't feel well, but you've got work to do. But even just getting out of bed and just sitting on a chair next to the bed, if you can just find it in yourself to drag yourself to the chair, it can actually make such a difference to kind of your kind of overall well-being. And it's so funny that something so small can actually make that difference. So yeah, completely agree. It's just finding that kind of separation and structure, I suppose. I'm just going to, I just saw, what's the name of the charity you work for, Pippa? Jennifer, the charity I work for is called Astrid. You can find it at astrid.org.uk, or we're Astrid Charity on Instagram. Let's have a look at some other questions, shall we? I think we're doing quite well here. We've got 40 people watching. We've got some really lovely comments coming in, so thank you very much.
Numbers going up.
They are, yeah. And if you've joined a little bit later, please do feel free to share any of your own questions or your own experiences. Going back to the ones that we had previously, let's see what we've not covered yet. Something that comes up quite a lot, even without the context of lockdown, is re-establishing a routine. So people have had very different routines over the last 3 or 4 months, however long lockdown has been going on now. So any tips for re-establishing a routine as things are changing, finding a routine that works for you? Any kind of advice in that area, I suppose?
Yeah, absolutely. And routine when you have a chronic illness is central. We need to remember that the human body, biorhythms, we produce different hormones at different times of day. We regulate our blood sugars through the day. We have things like cortisol that wake us up, melatonin, and that put us to sleep. So the human body is designed to have a rhythm through the day. So it's really, really vital that to help your health, you have some sort of pattern or rhythm. Normally suggest we're starting with your sleep time, any daytime sleep that you feel you have to have, kind of put those in first. Put your eating times in, because it's really, really important that you eat consistently so that you can manage your blood sugars. So put those in. And then depending on what level you are, you can either then fill the gaps and decide, right, this is a time for physical activity or cognitive activity or social activity, but put in a limit. So decide what time of day you're going to do it and put a limit to it. So that will be 30 minutes and then I'll have a rest. And try to balance the activity. So if you're doing an activity period, try and then have a rest period. or for people who are very poorly and really struggle, it's worth just doing that on an hourly basis. So just try and think about an hourly clock. And within that hour, put your rest in, how much rest you need. And then maybe think about what else do you need to do. You need to get up and get a drink or go to the toilet. So that's a bit of physical activity. So try and put that in there once an hour. About your content you might do, like social media, TV, emails, reading, whatever you can manage. And if you try and put the activity in bits and put in some proper relaxation, because the other problem is that people think that rest is relaxing. And actually you can still be using a lot of energy if you're resting and running. So we spend a lot of time teaching people how to properly switch off, because you've got two parts to your nervous system, the on switch, off switch, and it's really, really important that you learn to access your off switch. So if each hour or at certain times during the day, you put in some proper practice at clearing the mind, into the body, relaxing the muscles. You can either do that each hour and just keep repeating it through the day, the same pattern, or set yourself up a bit like a school timetable, really, and say, right, over the week, here's my slots. The other piece of advice I would have is a lot of people base their activity levels on their good days. So they think, oh, well, I can sometimes do this. So then they try and do a day. But that's your good day. And have a good day every day. So it's really important that you, when you set your activity levels, you set it at a level you can sustain each day. And some days you might be worth do as much. But it's really important that on the good days you don't do more. As I know you know, Pippa, we mustn't boom and crash. So we need to make sure that routine is a sustainable.
Absolutely. And I was sat here listening to that thinking that rings so true. That's something I really struggled with. I thought I was invincible. I thought I could do all of the things all of the time. I thought that reading and listening to music was rest, when in fact it was using up so much of my cognitive energy. And the other thing that came to mind then when you were talking about that is something else that I learned when I was at Yorkshire Fatigue Clinic. And that was that as important as it is to think about pacing within the context of a single day, it's also important to look at your week as a whole. So even if when I had it down during the day, I would do like 3 really packed days and then have 3 days off, thinking, oh yes, I can get everything done now and then have 3 days to recover, when in the long term that perhaps isn't quite as sustainable. So I think that's definitely something that rings true for me, and I think that's something that will ring true for a lot of people as well. It's very much a learning curve, isn't it?
It is. Learning, be prepared to adapt, but learn from your mistakes, because what a lot of people do is they have a bad day and then they don't think, well, what could I do differently next time? Yeah, so we've got to learn from the bad days. What did I do that might have triggered that? What did that was too much? And sometimes we also over focus on the physical and forget that actually people take energy, socializing takes energy, just your family take energy, thinking takes energy. So don't always just cut out the muscle work, because actually the body is designed to move. Sometimes think about, am I getting enough breaks for people? Am I relaxing enough? Am I clearing my brain enough?
Absolutely. And that ties in really nicely to a question that I myself put on this list. And that was that I found that I've lost a bit of stamina in being around other people. So over the last 3 months, because I've spent more time on my own, I found that going out and socializing takes a lot more deliberate energy and results in a lot more payback than what it once did. So I suppose, do you kind of have any tips for building up stamina on that side of things as well? Because that's perhaps one of the areas where people are less aware that energy expenditure is required, I suppose.
Yeah. So I always say, before you do any social activity, try and know what your limit is and plan it, and try and communicate that to the other person. So then, say if you're meeting a friend for the first time, it's very easy to get carried away chatting, you get really into it, and you can find quite a long period of time has gone past and you've gone way past your limits. So if before you have that meeting, you decide, well, actually, I think I can meet for half an hour, communicate that to the person, say, look, it'd be lovely to see you. Can we just meet up for half an hour? So they know from the very beginning, and set an alarm. You need something going to sound to prompt both you and them to say, okay, we've come to the end of our time.
Yeah.
But then you can build it up slowly. The with some stuff is people just get into it, you get into the flow of it, and then you forget all about the pacing.
Guilty. Yeah, I like the idea of having an alarm, because that's something that you can't ignore. Like, you can't pretend it hasn't happened. That is a deliberate stopping point. So that's really helpful. Thank you. I suppose kind of related to that and that last point, Becca has asked, how do you properly rest and switch off? Should I sit in silence with my eyes closed? So I think a lot of people must be wondering this at the minute, given what we've just talked about. So any tips for properly switching off?
Yeah, so you really need to train your body how to relax. For a lot of people with chronic health problems, it was never a state they were used to before they got ill. They were busy people doing lots of things. So they've never really learned how to relax. It doesn't necessarily involve silence. For some people, they can't tolerate any noise, so silence may be your only option. But actually, it doesn't like silence. You know, we were born in nature. We had sounds, the birds sing, you know, there's wind, there's rain, and silence meant danger, because it means something's coming. So your brain, when you're in silence, is constantly looking for noise, and you'll find that any little bang of the door or a sound that goes off will feel stronger because you've got that contrast. So actually the best way to relax is to use sounds, actually like nature sounds. Place something into the room you can tolerate, you feel comfortable with. Practice the art of learning to relax your nervous system. So there's lots of apps, lots of online resources, YouTube, TED Talks, 101 things about how to learn to relax. So it is a state you have to teach your body to get into, and there's different ways of doing it. Some people like mindfulness, some people like muscle-based, some people like to breathe, some people need a heart rate monitor so they can see that they're slowing their heart rate. There's so many different ways to do it. So what I would say to people, experiment, find your best way to relax, what environment, what sounds. But the difference is that your muscles let go, your heart rate comes down, and you breathe. When you're in a parasympathetic, a resting state, your whole body lets go. Whereas you can lie still and still be really tense, and your brain can be really active. So it's a real trick that you've got to learn, and it takes training.
Yeah. Again, definitely relatable. That's so interesting about the sound and how the silence kind of puts you on standby for danger. That's so interesting. I'm going to go away and do some more reading about that, because that's so interesting. Patricia added, while we were talking about that Headspace is a brilliant app. I've heard really good things about Headspace. Personally, I struggle with mindfulness. I've been trying for years, but if you're not getting on with mindfulness, an app that I use is called Calm. It's designed for mindfulness, but like you were saying about the nature sounds, there's some really brilliant nature sounds on there for free. So if you're looking for somewhere to get started or to like dip your toe in, Calm, the Calm app might be good as well, and that's free. Cool, yep.
One thing to say about the Calm app, Pippa, as well. Just with the Calm app, there's story section on there, and people, I know Harry Styles has done a story. Some people really like the stories because it's just listening to a voice. So you don't even necessarily need to do an active relaxation. Sometimes you just need to listen to something.
Amazing. I'm going away with so many things to try after this. It's brilliant. Okay, keeping an eye on comments. Let's pick something else off. I'm finding that a lot of the things on this list we're kind of covering as we go along, which is great. We've done that one. Okay, this is quite an interesting one. Kind of through lockdown, with kind of ongoing medical care for people who are doing ongoing condition management that's not COVID related. A lot of people have found that their appointments and support have had to be delivered remotely. So instead of going in person for appointments, they've had them over telephone or online. And for a lot of people with chronic illnesses, that's actually been a big advantage. So the question somebody asked is, can I continue to ask for my appointments to be given remotely through video calls, even though it's no longer deemed necessary by official guidance? So any thoughts in that area, I suppose?
Yeah, I think from a health provider point of view, we always did video calls before for individual work, and we always use things like Skype, etc. But now we've put all our groups online as well. So I think accessibility of health services has really changed. I've had a lot of children who weren't given access to mental health services because they were told you have to attend the clinic. Whereas as soon as we went into lockdown, they started getting care and they started to get appointments. So I think it's been a real revolution. I would definitely say to people, yes, you're very entitled to make that request. Health professionals are now used to using these resources, so it should still remain accessible. And I would definitely ask for it. The only problem is going to be where a doctor actually physically to see you.
Yeah.
So those may be the things where you're going to have to go in, or you need a physical intervention. But certainly for a lot of chronic health management, it can be done virtually, and yes, absolutely request it.
And provided, as you say, like somebody doesn't require like a physical in-person assessment, what would be the way that somebody would ask for that adjustment? Would it be to the receptionist, to their specific healthcare professional? Like, what would be the process for kind of asking for that, I suppose?
Yeah, if you get sent an appointment, then normally there'll be a contact number on the appointment. I would just ring that up and ask if you can get it, because it depends on the clinic, it depends where you're being seen. But certainly there'll be some sort of contact point when you're given an appointment. Just straight away phone them up and say, is there a way to do it virtually without me coming in?
Yeah, sounds good. Hopefully that will that will be helpful to people. So another kind of one related to day-to-day life, I suppose. This is a really interesting one. Worried about the new measures in public places, such as queuing to get into shops and brain fog, making it difficult to follow one-way systems. I thought that was a really relevant point for those who are able to leave the house and they're comfortable doing that. So to break that down a bit, I suppose, queuing to get into shops.
Yeah, I think some of it was initially people's panic as well about what it was going to be like, particularly when we had the big queues outside of supermarkets, and people are thinking that all shops are going to be like that. I think the reality is that actually shops were a lot quieter than you think. So it depends which sort of shop you want to go to and where it is. I certainly walked around York the other weekend and there was barely anybody there. Yeah. I think there was one queue outside of one shop, and I personally wouldn't have gone and stood in it. And actually, when you went back round half an hour later, the queue had gone. So it's maybe thinking about, it may not be as bad as you think it is. Some of the shops are publishing online, or you can do it on through Google about their waiting times. So they certainly did that for the supermarkets when it was busy, so you could see when the quieter times were, which might be helpful. But it's a lot better. I think a lot of it was our fear that everybody was going to be queuing everywhere. And I think unless it's a barber shop, a lot of shops are actually quieter. So just go to the shop, less queues, and come back. The one way I think is interesting, because again, I went round shops and everybody was going the wrong way. And I'm pretty sure they didn't have brain fog. So I think it's absolutely, there's normally shop assistants. You can normally just follow the person in front. So again, I think people get very worried about these things, but the reality is if you go the wrong way, somebody will just point you where you need to go. You're not going to get arrested. It's not a crime for doing it. And also even with the shops, if you want to take a seat, if you've got to queue or wait around, some people have sort of walking sticks that you can sit on that turn into chairs. Or if you need to take a wheelchair, because a lot of people have wheelchairs, but don't like using them. If it's saver energy, because you're going to have to be stood for a while, take the wheelchair.
Absolutely. Never worry about using a wheelchair. It can be a game changer. The only other thing that came to mind when thinking about this one, if it's a case of just having that peace of mind when you're going out and about, there is something you can get that's called an access card, and that's run by a scheme called Credibility. And it's basically a visual way of showing that you may have additional needs or you might need a little bit of additional support. And since shops have begun opening again, there've actually been some really positive reports of people showing the access card to a member of staff and being able to bypass some of the queues, which is amazing. And I think it goes without saying that that's going to vary depending on where you are. There's going to be certain shops that are more receptive to it than others. But again, it's having that peace of mind. I have an access card. You can just register for them online. And then I suppose as well, there's the sunflower lanyard scheme. That was a really big thing before lockdown, where you can get yourself a sunflower lanyard as a way of representing that you might have a hidden condition. And again, when it comes to communicating with other people or like members of staff, especially if you're going the wrong way around a one-way system, which I'm sure I will be at some point, might just be a visual representation if that's something you're comfortable with. So yeah, I just thought that might be worth throwing in there as well, because sometimes just having the peace of mind and knowing that you've got something, making it more visible, especially when you have an invisible condition, that can be a big part of the battle in my experience.
Absolutely. And I would certainly say, remember that when we do all start getting to go on holiday again, if you are going on holiday as someone who's got chronic condition, always ask for the special assistance, because you don't have to queue. They'll take you straight through. It's a lot better than standing around in the queue.
Absolutely. It just, if there's anything that can just slightly reduce the pressure that you're putting on yourself and the things that are going to reduce your energy. I know it can feel a little bit difficult asking for these things sometimes, but it's worth it, isn't it? It's worth doing, because at the end of the day, you've got to put your health first. That just reminded me of another question, and this is something I have no experience of, and I don't think many people will have at this stage, but just in case you have any kind of useful advice. A few people were asking about recommendations for travelling safely on public transport with fatigue, with the ongoing situation. So kind of, I suppose, staying safe in terms of the virus and also staying safe in terms of your chronic illness. Like I say, I have no experience with that at the minute, so I don't know if there's anything useful you can add in that area.
I mean, public transport is obviously kind of one area that is very difficult because you've got a lot of people. Yeah. So again, it's options about, are there quieter times? Some public transport is in certain parts of the country is a lot quieter than others. So it might be safe in your area if you're in quite a quiet area. Obviously, you've got to wear the mask. So I think people worry a lot about the risk of the virus, but the reality is it is dropping in the community. And you've also got to think about, it doesn't actually affect you differently unless you've got one of the underlying conditions that they are concerned about. So diabetes, respiratory problems, etc. A lot of people say you've got chronic pain, you're at no greater risk from the virus cause. It won't affect you worse because of your chronic pain. I think the concern people have is it will make their chronic pain more difficult to deal with, but the itself doesn't affect you worse. So it's clearly wise to take all the precautions, be sensible, think about where you're going. If you don't need to go, don't. Yeah. Again, if people are going back to work and they have to go on transport and you've got a disability, you can go for the access to work scheme and see if you can get a taxi paid for. Rather than sit on a bus. So there may be other options I hadn't thought about before, but happy going on the bus to work or the train, that actually maybe you need to think, well, I'll just work more remotely or I'll get another means of going to work at the moment. But obviously you've got to wear your mask.
Yes, absolutely. It'd be interesting to know if anybody watching this at the minute, any recommendations for masks, because I know a lot of people are looking for them at the minute. If you have any recommendations of particular brands or where you've got them from, that might be helpful to share with others. Martin has asked where you get the sunflower.
Yeah. The lanyards.
Yeah, the sunflower lanyards. Oh, the sound's broken. We were doing so well. The sound's broken up a little bit now. Do you want to answer that, Sue, or shall I? The sunflower lanyards.
You can answer about the lanyards and I'll answer about the masks.
Got it. The sunflower lanyards, Martin, if you just, I think the website is called Sunflower Lanyard Scheme, but if you just type in sunflower lanyards into Google, it should come up, and they're very affordable. I think mine was only £1. So that's that. But yeah, any thoughts on where to get masks? That would be really helpful.
So masks are difficult because it depends what you need. So obviously there's different grades of masks, and there are medical masks that have got respiratory parts to them, and obviously you can just use cloth, and they say, you know, you can use a face covering. They're not necessarily masks. It's about what's comfortable. It's about where you're going. Yeah, it's about your feelings with your breathing. Some people get very claustrophobic with masks. So do bear in mind that if you've got a medical reason, you have to wear a mask. There are exceptions to the rules. If you feel you can't breathe, or it causes you to be anxious, or you've got other issues, so you may want to check out whether you have to wear a mask. And if you want a mask, practice it at home and see that it's comfortable, that you can breathe in it, and that you can tolerate it, because obviously some people find different smells are difficult, different textures on their skin are difficult. So find what's comfortable. But at the end of the day, a mask is a mask. It's just something that you've got to wear when you go out, and it's about really protecting other people from you. It's stopping you coughing on other people. Well, I think most people with a chronic health condition wouldn't go out if they felt unwell.
Absolutely, yeah. I feel like people with any kind of long-term health condition are particularly like conscious and mindful of where they're at with their symptoms and how that might impact other people. I think we're a good bunch like that. Going back to the sunflower lanyards, a few people have said you can get them for free in supermarkets, and yes, that's important to say as well. You can borrow them in supermarkets. If you go to customer services, you can ask for them. But if you want to buy one to take away with you and use in other situations, they are very affordable, and that's something that I made the decision to do. So it's worth considering, I would say.
Definitely a good idea.
Yeah, and they come in useful for such a wide range of situations that you wouldn't necessarily think they would as well. So would highly recommend. Okay, let's have a look. We are, we're getting through these really quickly. Let's see, what haven't we answered? Thank you so much for your lovely comments that are still coming in. It's so nice to see people are watching, and I really hope this is helpful so far. We've got some really lovely feedback. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Sarah. Let's see what else. We've done traveling, we've done employment, we've done re-establishing a routine, we've done medical appointments, we've done explaining to others. Let's have a think. Is there anything else, any other specific areas that you can think of that might be kind of related to lockdown and coming out of lockdown?
I think the main thing is to see this as an opportunity. I think, you know, the more positive you can be, as you say, other people's minds have changed. I think other people are a bit more reflective on what's important in life, and everybody's kind of got off the rat race for a little bit and realised there's more to life than just doing constantly. So we need to encourage that, and also, you know, to be assertive, go for what you need. You know, if you need to pace things out better and you've got used to not seeing people frequently, give them that feedback. You know, actually, it's really helpful for me that we've only met up once a month instead of once every week. Can I carry this on? Because if you don't say it, they won't know it. So I think it's really important to think about what you need in this time, establish the routine that works for you, but communicate with other people and try and help other people understand why it's of such benefit to you, because it does make such a difference to the life of people who are chronically unwell. If you take all that pressure away and you don't feel like you have to do so many things, everyone thinks, yes, but I should be doing this and I should be doing that. And the reality is we've all realised we don't have to do all this stuff. There's a lot of stuff we do in life that isn't necessary. So try not to worry so much about all the things you think you should be doing and everybody else is doing. Yeah, and I think life after lockdown is not going to be the same for healthy people either. I think people will slow down more. We're going to have to live with restrictions for quite a while. I think people's fear was we were just going to lift the restrictions and everybody goes back to normal. And the reality is, you know, we're facing this longer term till we get a vaccine. So it's going to improve, but it's not quite going to go rushing back to where we were. So make the most of that.
Absolutely. I think that's quite a nice point to end it on as well, just to kind of enjoy this time as much as you can, be mindful of what you need. and to see the opportunity in it, I suppose, because I mean, speaking from someone who's in the kind of chronic illness charity sector, like there is an opportunity here. Like people are, for the first time, having kind of more of a first person understanding of some of the issues that chronically ill people have been facing for years, and that haven't gone recognised. So it's from our side of things, it's kind of like how to utilise that and how to further our cause and the work we're doing, and hopefully just bring a greater awareness to some of these issues and try and tackle them going forward on a longer term basis. But in terms of individuals, yeah, I completely agree. It's about finding what works for you, being mindful of it, looking after yourself, and just keeping positive, really, I suppose.
And I think the other positive that's not so much for individuals is certainly from the point of view of chronic symptoms like fatigue. I expect there to be a significant increase in research. You know, the fact that so many people are having long-term health problems after COVID, although that's a very unfortunate situation, will actually highlight that so many people become ill after any virus or any infection or trauma or life events, that actually there'll be more research and more money because it's more high profile. So maybe it will help the whole of health move forward if we learn to understand why people develop these symptoms as opposed to other people. So fingers crossed, long term, there's positives for individuals and community as well.
Absolutely, I completely agree. Fingers crossed. Brilliant. I think, yeah, like I say, I think that's a really nice note to end it on. So I just wanted to say thank you so much, Sue, for your time this evening, because I mean, purely for me, this has been so helpful and so interesting. And judging by the comments, I really hope this has been interesting for other people as well. It's such a grey area. So having any insight at all into how to navigate these challenges and the unique things that people with chronic illnesses face, I think is really valuable. So just thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
No problem. I'm happy to help, Pippa, and thank you for all the work that you do as well, because it really helps people out there that they've got people like you to speak to and share experiences, and I'm sure it's very, very valued.
Thank you so much. You've been putting really useful resources out at the minute, I've seen. So where can people find more from you after they come away from this?
So obviously, if anyone's got any questions or queries, then we've got the Yorkshire Fatigue Clinic website or our Facebook. Or our Twitter account, so you can get in touch with us at the clinic. We've done some resources which are being used nationally for fatigue following COVID, and those are on the Royal College of OT website, but they've also just been adopted by NHS England. Wow. So those are the new guidance for managing fatigue. But yeah, the clinic website will be able to point you to wherever you need to go.
Awesome. And I'll try and link as many resources as I can after I've done this broadcast. Please go and follow Yorkshire Fatigue Clinic. If you like, you can find me at Life of Pippa on social media. My blog is Life of Pippa. So I'll try and put as many useful resources as I can. I'll put them wherever I can. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your time, and thank you for joining in and sharing your comments. Please feel free to share this. Fingers crossed there's going to be a broadcast that you can watch back. I'm going to go and investigate that now. But yeah, let's end it there, shall we? Thank you very much.